They forced me back to office, so I turned the break room into a jungle. 3 years of peaceful remote work vanished with a single company-wide email. Return to office. Mandatory 5 days a week. Effective next month. I stared at my screen, my morning coffee turning bitter in my mouth. That was the moment I decided Pinnacle Solutions would regret crossing Sarah Walker. I used to be reasonable, professional, the kind of employee who brought homemade cookies to meetings and remembered everyone's birthdays. But something snapped that day. Maybe it was the cavalier way they dismissed our work-life balance. Maybe it was how they expected us to upend our lives without explanation. Or maybe it was because I'd finally found peace away from the fluorescent hell of corporate America. And they were dragging me back. Whatever the reason, I was going to make them pay. Not with anything illegal. I'm too smart for that. No, my revenge would be perfectly within company guidelines. Malicious compliance was my new game. And I was about to become a grandmaster. It started small. A pothos plant on my desk. A peace lily by the window. Innocent enough. But plants have a way of multiplying when no one's paying attention. The email announcing our return landed on a Tuesday morning in April. By Friday, I had my plan fully formed, an Amazon cart filled with purchases that would make any botanist proud, and a smile that made my husband ask if I was feeling all right. Never better, I replied, hitting the checkout button. The war against Pinnacle Solutions had begun, and they didn't even know it. The office building loomed over me like a concrete tombstone, its glass windows reflecting the cloudy sky. 2 years and 7 months since I'd last walked through those revolving doors, and nothing had changed. Same security guard, same sterile lobby, same dead-eyed employees shuffling toward the elevator banks. I shifted the weight of my oversized tote bag and plastered on my best corporate smile. The bag contained my laptop, my lunch, and my first soldier in this war. A small Monstera Deliciosa. Its leaves still perky despite the journey. Sarah, long time no see. I turned to see Olivia from accounting waving enthusiastically. Her energy was always a bit much for 8 a.m. on a Monday, but today it felt like an assault. Hey, Liv, good to see you. I lied, matching her pace toward the elevators. Can you believe we're back? I'm actually kind of excited. Working from home was so isolating, you know? I didn't know. I had loved every minute of my remote existence. The quiet, the comfort, the ability to work in sweatpants with my cat on my lap, no commute, no office politics, no pretending to be busy when I'd finished my work early. Totally, I said, jabbing the elevator button repeatedly. Super exciting. The elevator doors opened to reveal 4 more colleagues crammed inside. I recognized them all but couldn't remember half their names. That was another perk of remote work. I could check people's names in the Zoom display before speaking to them. Hold the door for Thomas, someone called. I reluctantly stuck my arm out as a breathless man in a rumpled suit sprinted toward us. Thomas Kim, our new VP of Operations who had spearheaded this return-to-office disaster. He'd been hired 8 months ago and immediately started making noise about company culture and collaborative synergy and other buzzwords that basically translated to, I can't micromanage you if I can't see you. Thanks, he panted, squeezing in beside me. First day back, exciting times ahead. I nodded noncommittally and stared at the illuminated floor numbers as they slowly ticked upward. Floor 7, our destination. Marketing department. The doors slid open to reveal a freshly renovated office space. Gone were the cubicles of yesteryear, replaced by collaborative workstations that offered zero privacy and maximum noise pollution. The walls had been painted a cheerful shade of blue that was supposed to increase productivity, but just reminded me of institutional cafeterias. Your assigned desk is over by the window, said Thomas, gesturing vaguely to the left. We've done assigned seating to maximize department synergy. Synergy. There was that word again. I bit my tongue and headed toward the window area, where small nameplates marked our territories. I found mine sandwiched between Ben from Content Strategy and Kayla from Digital Marketing, both nice enough but known talkers. Perfect. I set my tote bag down and began unpacking. Laptop, notebook, pens, and finally, my little monstera, which I positioned carefully at the corner of my desk. Is that allowed? Ben asked, eyeing the plant suspiciously. I smiled. Company Handbook. Section 12.3. Employees may personalize their workspaces with appropriate items that do not damage company property. Plants are specifically mentioned as acceptable. He looked impressed. You memorized the handbook. Just the parts that matter, I replied, caressing one of the monstera's glossy leaves. Just the parts that matter. By lunchtime, I'd reconnected with most of my team, sat through 2 pointless meetings that could have been emails, and had mentally calculated that I'd already wasted 47 minutes on small talk. My productivity was in the toilet, but apparently that was a worthwhile sacrifice for culture. I headed to the break room with my packed lunch and nearly collided with Thomas, who was giving a tour to some visitors in suits. And this is our break room, he was saying proudly, fully stocked with complimentary coffee, tea, and healthy snacks to keep our team energized throughout the day. I glanced around the sterile space. 4 tables with uncomfortable chairs, a sad coffee machine, a refrigerator plastered with passive-aggressive notes about stealing food, 1 pathetic spider plant hanging in the corner, its leaves brown at the tips from neglect. Thomas noticed me hovering in the doorway. Sarah, how's your first day back? Illuminating, I replied. I see the break room could use some attention. He frowned slightly. What do you mean? I gestured to the dying spider plant. Studies show that plants in workspaces increase productivity by 15% and reduce stress by 37%. That poor thing isn't doing anyone any favors. The statistics were completely fabricated, but Thomas didn't need to know that. Interesting, he said, his eyes lighting up with the possibility of increased productivity metrics. Maybe we should consider adding more plants to the common areas. I suppressed a smile. Just a thought. No, it's a good one. We want employees to feel comfortable here. Maybe you could spearhead a small initiative. Nothing too elaborate, of course. I'd be happy to, I said, the picture of helpful cooperation. I happen to know quite a bit about indoor plants. That was an understatement. During my remote work period, I'd transformed my home office into a veritable greenhouse. I had 67 plants at last count, each thriving under my care. My husband joked that we were 1 fern away from being classified as a botanical garden. Thomas looked relieved. Excellent. Just keep it reasonable, budget-wise. Maybe you can send me a quick proposal. Absolutely, I replied, already mentally composing an email that would sound professional while laying the groundwork for my revenge. I'll have something for you by end of day. He moved on with his tour group, and I sat down at an empty table with my lunch, feeling the first stirrings of satisfaction. Phase 1 was progressing nicely. I'd expected to have to fight for permission to add plants, but Thomas had practically handed me the keys to the kingdom. Now all I needed was for my Amazon delivery to arrive at home, and Phase 2 could begin. My proposal was a masterpiece of corporate manipulation. I'd cited actual scientific studies about the benefits of plants in the workplace, improved air quality, reduced stress, increased productivity, decreased absenteeism. I'd included a modest initial budget that Thomas approved without hesitation. And I'd volunteered to maintain the plants myself, eliminating any concerns about additional janitorial work. What I hadn't mentioned was the sheer quantity of plants I planned to introduce, or how quickly they would multiply. By the end of the first week, I'd brought in 6 more plants, 2 for my desk and 4 for the break room. Small, unobtrusive specimens that nobody would object to. A pothos for the top of the refrigerator, its vines strategically positioned to eventually cascade down the side. A peace lily for the windowsill. A small snake plant for the counter near the coffee machine. And a cute little ZZ plant for the center of the main table. It already feels more welcoming in here, commented Priya from the design team as she microwaved her lunch on Wednesday. That's the goal, I replied cheerfully. Plants make people happy. By the end of the second week, I'd added another 8 plants to the break room and started expanding to the corridor outside it. Small succulents appeared on the ledge beneath the motivational posters. A hanging basket materialized near the restrooms. Two large ferns flanked the entrance to the break room itself. People were starting to notice, but the reactions were uniformly positive. "I love what you're doing with the plants," said Rebecca, one of the senior account managers. "This place was so sterile before." I beamed at her. "Thanks, I'm just getting started." That was the beauty of my plan. Everyone loved plants. They made the office look better. They improved the air quality. They gave people something pleasant to look at besides their computer screens. Nobody was going to complain about a few plants. Not even when a few plants became a dozen, or 2 dozen, or more. By the end of the first month, my desk had become a miniature jungle, with plants spilling onto the desks of my neighbors, who surprisingly didn't mind. Ben had actually started asking me for plant care tips, and Kayla had requested her own pothos cutting to nurse along. The break room transformation was more dramatic. The pathetic spider plant had been rehabilitated and now had several healthy babies dangling from it. The pothos had indeed cascaded down the refrigerator and was making its way along the counter. The peace lily had doubled in size, and they'd been joined by a family of calatheas, a majesty palm, 3 different varieties of philodendron, and an impressive bird of paradise that commanded the corner by the window. But I was just warming up. Phase 3 began in the second month, when I introduced what I called the plant library to the break room. A small bookshelf appeared, filled with plant care books and small pots of adoptable plant babies that colleagues could take home. The idea, I explained to Thomas during his inspection of my progress, is to extend the wellness benefits beyond the office. Employees can borrow a book or adopt a plant baby for their home, creating a connection between work and home life. Thomas loved it, of course. He was all about connection and work-life integration, never balance. That would imply work wasn't always the priority. What he didn't realize was that the plant library served 2 purposes. First, it made me look like a team player invested in office morale. Second, and more importantly, it created a steady stream of new plants coming into the office as people brought back books or brought in their own plants to show me. "Sarah, my pothos cutting grew a new leaf," Kayla would exclaim, bringing her small pot to my desk for inspection. "Sarah, is my succulent getting too much sun?" Ben would ask, positioning his little echeveria under my desk lamp for better viewing. "Sarah, what's this white stuff on my plant?" Olivia would worry, bringing in her entire peace lily for diagnosis. Each interaction strengthened my position as the office plant expert and normalized the increasing greenery throughout our floor. It also gave me perfect cover to bring in more and larger specimens without raising eyebrows. By the end of the second month, the break room had been thoroughly infiltrated. Plants covered every surface. Vines draped from shelves and cabinets. Large potted specimens guarded the corners. The air was noticeably fresher, and people were spending more time there, lingering over their lunches or coffee breaks. Thomas was delighted. Employee satisfaction scores had ticked up in the monthly survey, with several comments specifically mentioning the improved atmosphere of the break room. "Whatever you're doing, keep it up," he told me during our monthly department meeting. "The plant initiative has been a surprising success." I smiled modestly, happy to help. Little did he know that I was just getting started. Phase 4 was the most ambitious, expanding beyond the break room. I'd already established beachheads in the corridors and at strategic desks throughout the marketing department. Now it was time to push the boundaries. I started by approaching other department heads. "I've noticed how much everyone enjoys the plants in our break room. I would say, I'd be happy to help set up something similar in your area if you're interested." Most were enthusiastic. The accounting department got a collection of easy care succulents and cacti. I told them they were precise and low maintenance, like good bookkeeping. The creative team received colorful flowering plants that matched their energetic vibe. HR got calming lavender and chamomile plants that made their area smell like a spa. Within 3 months of our return to office, Pinnacle Solutions had been thoroughly infiltrated. Every department had its own mini garden. The main reception area sported an impressive fiddle leaf fig tree that immediately became the talk of the building. Conference rooms featured elegant table arrangements of air plants and small succulents. And at the center of it all was the break room, my masterpiece. Walking into the break room was now like entering another world. Hanging plants created a living canopy overhead. Climbing vines covered sections of the walls. Large leafy plants screened off cozy nooks where people could sit in relative privacy. The air was humid and oxygen-rich, filled with the subtle fragrance of greenery and the occasional flowering plant. It had become the heart of the office. People gravitated there not just for meals, but for impromptu meetings, quiet work sessions, or simply to decompress among the foliage. I'd even installed a small fountain in one corner that provided soothing background noise to mask conversations. The company-wide impact was undeniable. Absenteeism was down. Morale was up. Even productivity had improved, though I suspected that was because people were happier rather than because of any magical plant properties. Thomas was ecstatic. The Plant Initiative has been our most successful employee engagement program ever, he announced at the quarterly all-hands meeting. Sarah has single-handedly transformed our office environment. I accepted the praise graciously, playing the role of the helpful team player. Inside, I was laughing. They thought this was about employee engagement, about making the office more pleasant. This was revenge, served green and thriving. Because here's what no one had considered. Plants are living things that require care. Care that took time out of the workday. Every morning, I spent the first 30 minutes at the office watering and tending to plants instead of checking emails. Several times throughout the day, I would make rounds to different departments, ostensibly to check on the plants, but really to stretch my legs and take breaks from my actual work. At least once a week, I'd spend an entire afternoon reorganizing the break room plants, which mostly involved sitting among them with my laptop, enjoying the humid air and pretending to work. And I wasn't the only one. Dozens of employees had adopted desk plants that needed attention. The plant library required maintenance. The more elaborate plant installations needed regular care that often involved multiple people. In short, a significant amount of company time was now being dedicated to plant care rather than work. And it was all officially sanctioned. But the true genius of my plan went deeper. The plants had fundamentally changed the office dynamic. The break room, once a place for hurried meals before rushing back to desks, had become a destination. People lingered there. Conversations happened. Ideas were exchanged. Work still got done, but at a more humane pace. The rigid boundaries of the corporate workday had softened, wrapped in tendrils of pothos and shrouded by monstera leaves. The carefully scheduled efficiency that Thomas had hoped to achieve by bringing everyone back to the office had been subverted by nature itself. And the best part? It was all his idea. On paper, anyway. As I sat in the break room's most secluded corner, hidden from view by a massive palm and a curtain of string-of-pearls plants, I smiled to myself. My coffee had long since cooled, but I was in no hurry to return to my desk. Through the green filter of leaves, I could see 3 members of the executive team engaged in conversation at another table, while a group of junior designers sketched ideas by the window. This wasn't just a break room anymore. It was a community space, a refuge, a reminder that even in the sterile world of corporate America, life finds a way. Thomas appeared in the doorway, scanning the room with a slightly perplexed expression. He'd been doing that more often lately, looking around as if trying to remember what the office had looked like before the plants, before the transformation. He spotted me and made his way over, navigating around a newly installed raised planter that divided the room. "Sarah," he said, settling into the chair opposite me, "I've been meaning to talk to you." My pulse quickened. Had he finally realized what I'd done? That my plant initiative was actually a subtle form of workplace rebellion. "The executive team is extremely impressed with the plant program," he continued. "Employee satisfaction is at an all-time high. Retention has improved. Even recruitment has gotten easier. Candidates love the office environment during their tours." I relaxed slightly. "That's great to hear. So great, in fact, that they want to expand it company-wide." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "They're creating a new position, Director of Workplace Environment and Well-Being. and they want you for the job. I blinked, genuinely surprised. Me? Who else? You've demonstrated exceptional initiative and results. The position comes with a substantial raise, of course, and you'd have a budget to implement similar programs across all our offices nationally. My mind raced. This was not part of the plan. I'd wanted to create a small rebellion, to carve out breathing space in a suffocating environment. I hadn't expected to create a career opportunity. I don't know what to say. Thomas smiled. Say yes, you've found your calling, Sarah. And frankly, the plants need you. No one else understands how to care for them properly. That much was true. I'd created an ecosystem that was, by design, dependent on my expertise. That had been part of my job security strategy. Make myself essential to the new office environment. Can I think about it? I asked. Of course, but don't take too long. The executive team is excited about this. After he left, I sat amid my jungle creation, thinking. This wasn't how revenge was supposed to work. I was supposed to be subtly undermining the system, not being rewarded by it. I was supposed to be finding small freedoms within the constraints of mandatory office attendance, not being offered a promotion because of it. But maybe this was better than revenge. Maybe I'd accidentally created something valuable. Something that made working in an office a little more human, a little more connected to the natural world. My phone buzzed with a calendar notification. Team meeting, conference room C, 2 p.m. Conference room C, the one with the huge windows and the collection of sun-loving plants I'd installed last month. The one where people actually showed up on time because it was pleasant to be there. I gathered my things and stood up, gently touching the leaves of a nearby calathea, as I did. Its leaves were folded up slightly, indicating it needed water. I made a mental note to tend to it after the meeting. As I navigated through the green labyrinth that had once been a sterile break room, I realized something important. I'd set out to make the company pay for forcing me back to the office, but I'd ended up making the office a place I didn't mind being. Was that surrender or victory? Maybe it was both. The national expansion of the Pinnacle Green Initiative, as the executives had branded it, was moving faster than anyone had anticipated. Within 6 months of my promotion, I had overseen the transformation of 3 regional offices and was consulting on the design of a new headquarters building that featured living walls and rooftop gardens. My team had grown to include a horticulturist, an interior designer specializing in biophilic design, and 2 junior coordinators who helped manage the logistics of plant installation and maintenance across multiple locations. The company had fully embraced the concept, realizing that the benefits extended far beyond employee satisfaction. Clients were impressed by our innovative workspace. Media outlets had featured our offices in articles about progressive corporate environments. Sustainability reports highlighted our improved air quality and reduced energy consumption. Plants provided natural cooling, reducing the need for air conditioning. Thomas had been promoted as well to Executive VP, largely on the strength of having championed the initiative that was now a cornerstone of Pinnacle's corporate identity. He never seemed to remember that it had all started as my small act of rebellion. In his mind, he'd given me permission to add a few plants, and I'd simply executed his vision exceptionally well. I let him have that fiction. It suited me to be seen as the loyal implementer rather than the instigator. My new role came with considerable flexibility. I traveled frequently to other offices, worked from home when needed to care for specialty plants in my personal greenhouse, now a legitimate business expense, and had the authority to modify spaces as I saw fit. In essence, I'd turned my revenge plot into a career advancement that gave me exactly what I'd wanted all along: autonomy, respect, and a connection to the natural world even within the confines of corporate life. But success brought complications. The more popular the initiative became, the more scrutiny it received. Facilities managers worried about moisture damage. Safety officers raised concerns about allergies. Finance questioned the ongoing maintenance costs. None of these challenges was insurmountable, but they required constant attention and negotiation. I spent more time in meetings and less time with actual plants, which wasn't exactly what I'd envisioned. And then there was the issue of scale. What had begun as my personal rebellion, my way of making an intolerable situation tolerable, had grown into a corporate program with objectives, metrics, and deliverables. The intimate connection I'd felt with my original plant collection was harder to maintain when dealing with thousands of plants across multiple locations. I found myself at a crossroads, questioning whether I'd won or lost my private war against mandatory office attendance. These thoughts preoccupied me as I sat in my favorite spot in the original break room jungle, still my preferred thinking space despite having a spacious private office now. The jungle had matured beautifully, with plants that had once been small specimens now reaching toward the ceiling. The space had evolved into a self-contained ecosystem, with humidity levels that supported even the most finicky tropical varieties. "There you are," said a familiar voice. I looked up to see Priya from design standing in the small clearing near my secluded corner. She'd become one of the most enthusiastic plant adopters, transforming the design studio into a green paradise that rivaled even the break room. "Just thinking," I replied, gesturing for her to join me. She settled onto the small bench across from me, carefully avoiding disturbing the trailing vines of a Hoya plant. "About the Seattle office, I heard there were some challenges with the installation." "No, that's under control. Just reflecting on how all this started." Priya smiled knowingly. "You mean your guerrilla gardening revenge against being forced back to the office?" I stared at her, shocked. "You knew?" She laughed. "Sarah, everyone knew. Well, everyone except Thomas and the executive team. The rest of us figured it out pretty quickly. But nobody said anything. Why would we? You were making the place better, creating breathing room in a corporate machine, fighting the good fight on behalf of all of us who hated being dragged back after tasting freedom." I shook my head, amazed. I thought I was being so subtle. "Subtle? You turned the break room into the Amazon rainforest within 3 months. Subtlety wasn't exactly your strong suit." She grinned. "But effectiveness? Absolutely. You found the perfect rebellion, one that no one could object to because it benefited everyone, even the people you were rebelling against. And now they're paying me to do it." "Exactly. You've achieved the impossible, getting corporate America to fund a humanizing influence on their sterile profit machines." She leaned forward, suddenly serious. "But that's not why I was looking for you. Have you heard the rumors about the new flexibility policy?" I frowned. "No, what rumors?" "Apparently, the executive team is considering a partial work-from-home policy. 3 days in office, 2 days remote. They're looking at the productivity data and realizing that people are actually more effective with a mixed approach." My heart skipped a beat. "Really? That's unexpected." "Is it, though? You've created spaces that remind everyone, including the executives, that environments matter, that humans need connection to nature and to each other, but also flexibility and autonomy. The plants aren't just making the air better, they're changing the company's DNA." I sat back, processing this information. If true, it represented a fundamental shift in the company's stance on remote work, the very issue that had sparked my rebellion in the first place. "Do you know when they're announcing this?" Priya shrugged. "It's still in discussion, but I have friends in HR who say it's moving forward. They're calling it the Balanced Workplace Initiative." "Another initiative," I said, smiling despite myself. Pinnacle loved its initiatives. "Your green revolution is evolving," Priya said, standing up. "Just thought you should know, since you started it all." After she left, I remained in my jungle sanctuary, thinking, if the company did implement a flexible work policy, would that mean I'd won my private war? Or had I simply been absorbed into the corporate machinery, my rebellion commodified and branded like everything else? Perhaps it didn't matter. The world I'd created within these walls had taken on a life of its own, growing and evolving beyond my original intentions. The plants didn't care about corporate politics or personal vendettas. They simply grew toward the light, finding their way around obstacles, adapting to their environment while subtly changing it to better suit their needs. There was wisdom in that approach. My phone buzzed with a meeting reminder. The executive strategy session was starting in 15 minutes, the one where, according to my agenda, we would be discussing workplace flexibility models for the modern workforce. I stood up, brushed a few stray leaves from my clothing, and made my way through the green labyrinth toward the door. Whatever happened in that meeting, whatever new direction the company decided to take, I'd already succeeded in the most important way. I'd created a space where humanity and nature could thrive even within the confines of corporate America. And if I occasionally entertained fantasies about what would happen if I stopped maintaining the elaborate watering systems I'd installed throughout the building, if I imagined the executive floor slowly being overtaken by untended plants like something from a post-apocalyptic film, well, that was my little secret. Some rebellions never truly end. They just evolve into something more complex, more subtle, and ultimately more powerful than mere revenge. Why? The Balanced Workplace Initiative became official policy exactly 9 months after our mandatory return to office. The announcement came during a company-wide meeting held in the atrium of headquarters, a space that had been transformed under my direction into a soaring indoor garden with multiple levels of plants creating a cathedral-like atmosphere. The symbolism wasn't lost on me as I sat in the front row, watching Thomas and the CEO unveil the new policy with great fanfare. 3 days in office, 2 days remote, with additional flexibility for those with special circumstances. Not quite the full remote freedom we'd enjoyed during the pandemic, but a significant concession nonetheless. Our journey back to the office has taught us valuable lessons about the importance of physical workspace, the CEO was saying, gesturing to the green canopy above. But we've also learned that balance is key to maintaining the exceptional talent and productivity that makes Pinnacle Solutions an industry leader. Balance. There was that word again. The corporate world loved to talk about balance while systematically undermining it. But this time, perhaps, there was substance behind the rhetoric. The success of our green initiative has demonstrated that when we create environments that support well-being, performance improves. Thomas added, the Balanced Workplace Initiative is a natural extension of that philosophy. I kept my expression neutral, but inside I was laughing. They still had no idea that the entire plant program had begun as an act of rebellion. In their minds, it had always been a visionary corporate strategy. After the announcement, as people mingled and discussed the new policy, Thomas made his way over to me. Congratulations, I said before he could speak. The new policy will be very popular. He smiled, looking genuinely pleased. It's the right direction, and your work helped make it possible. Sarah, the plants changed everything. For a moment, I was tempted to tell him the truth, to explain that my elaborate indoor gardens had been conceived as a subtle form of workplace sabotage. But what would be the point? The outcome had transcended my original petty motivations. I'm glad it worked out, I said instead. The executive team was particularly impressed by the productivity data from the departments with the most extensive plant installations. He continued. It contradicted all our assumptions about in-person collaboration. People were collaborating effectively even with plants creating natural divisions of space, sometimes more effectively because the conversations were more focused and deliberate. I nodded. Plants create boundaries without building walls. They define space while keeping it permeable. Exactly, and that got us thinking about other assumptions we might be wrong about. Like the assumption that people need to be physically present in an office 5 days a week to be productive, I wanted to ask, but restrained myself. Anyway, Thomas said, checking his watch. I have media interviews about the new policy all afternoon, but I wanted to let you know that we're expanding your department's budget for the next fiscal year. The executive team sees the plant program and the flexible work policy as complementary initiatives, both supporting our new corporate vision. After he left, I wandered through the atrium, observing my colleagues' reactions to the announcement. The mood was buoyant. People were excited about the prospect of regaining some of their freedom while maintaining the connection to the transformed office environment. Priya found me near the living wall that served as the atrium's focal point. Victory lap? She asked with a knowing smile. Something like that, I admitted, though I'm not sure who won in the end. Everyone won, she said firmly. That's the beauty of what you did, Sarah. You found a form of resistance that lifted everyone up instead of tearing anything down. I considered her words. Perhaps she was right. My initial motivation had been selfish, a personal vendetta against a policy I found restrictive and unnecessary. But the outcome had benefited the entire company, creating a more humane workplace and ultimately even achieving a version of my original goal: more flexibility and autonomy for all employees. "What will you do with your remote days?" Priya asked. I smiled. "Spend time with my plants at home, of course. My poor domestic jungle has been neglected since I've been focusing on the office varieties." "Of course," she laughed. The mother of dragons reuniting with her first children. The mother of dragons, I liked that. A small, unassuming marketing manager who had transformed a corporate environment through sheer force of will and a lot of photosynthesis. As the gathering began to disperse, people returning to their departments to discuss the implications of the new policy, I made my way back to the break room, the original jungle, where it had all begun. This space had evolved considerably since those early days. The plants had matured, creating a dense canopy that required regular pruning to maintain passable pathways. The lighting had been upgraded to support optimal growth. A sophisticated irrigation system now supplemented my hand-watering routine. But the essence remained the same: a green refuge in the heart of corporate America. A reminder that life finds a way, even in the most artificial environments. I settled into my favorite spot, surrounded by glossy leaves and the gentle sound of the small fountain I'd installed months ago. Through the green filter, I could see colleagues coming and going, their voices muffled by the foliage, their movements softened by the humid air. My phone buzzed with a notification, a calendar invite for a meeting next week to discuss the expansion of the plant program to international offices. The rebellion was going global. I accepted the invitation, then silenced my phone and set it aside. There would be time for planning and strategizing later. For now, I wanted to simply exist in this space I'd created, this living manifestation of what had begun as revenge but had evolved into something far more meaningful. The monstera beside me had unfurled a new leaf overnight, its surface still shiny and tender. I reached out to touch it gently, feeling the life pulsing through its veins. Plants didn't hold grudges. They didn't plot revenge. They simply adapted to their circumstances, finding light wherever they could, creating beauty even in unlikely places. Perhaps there was wisdom in that approach to the corporate world as well. Not passive acceptance, but strategic adaptation. Finding the cracks in the concrete and pushing through them, one green tendril at a time, until the entire structure was transformed from within. I leaned back, surrounded by my green allies, and smiled. The war was over. Nobody had surrendered. But everyone had won. And the break room would remain a jungle, a living reminder that even the most rigid systems can be softened by persistent, growing things. 18 months after the implementation of the Balanced Workplace Initiative, I found myself in a position I never could have anticipated when I first brought that small monstera to my desk. I was addressing a national conference on workplace design, sharing the story of Pinnacle's transformation into what industry publications had dubbed the Jungle Corporation. The key insight, I told the audience of HR executives, facilities managers, and corporate strategists, wasn't just that plants make spaces more attractive. It was recognizing that humans have an innate need to connect with nature, even, perhaps especially, in professional environments. The ballroom was packed, with people standing along the walls and sitting in the aisles. My presentation had been moved to the main stage after registration exceeded all expectations. Photos of Pinnacle's transformed offices flashed on the massive screens behind me, drawing gasps and murmurs from the audience. What began as a small experiment in our break room evolved into a company-wide philosophy. I continued, clicking to the next slide that showed the before and after of our headquarters atrium. The results speak for themselves: decreased absenteeism, improved retention, higher reported job satisfaction, and yes, even increased productivity. I paused, allowing the data points to sink in. The metrics were impressive, transforming what might have been dismissed as a feel-good initiative into a business imperative with measurable ROI. But numbers only tell part of the story, I said, moving away from the podium to stand center stage. The true transformation happened in the daily experience of our employees, the quality of conversations, the sense of well-being, the moments of creativity that occur when people feel connected to their environment instead of alienated from it. From the front row, Thomas gave me an encouraging nod. He'd flown in specifically to attend my presentation, a gesture that still felt surreal. The man whose return to office mandate had triggered my rebellious gardening had become my biggest champion. After the presentation, during the reception, I was approached by executives from companies across the country, all eager to discuss how they might implement similar programs. Business cards were pressed into my hands, invitations to consult were extended. One particularly enthusiastic CEO even offered me a position on the spot, with a salary that made my eyes widen. "You've started a movement," Thomas said, appearing at my elbow with 2 glasses of champagne, one of which he handed to me. Not bad for someone who once told me plants were just a hobby. I accepted the glass with a smile. I never imagined it would go this far. That was the honest truth. My revenge plot had spiraled beyond anything I could have anticipated, transforming not just Pinnacle, but potentially workplaces across the country. The irony wasn't lost on me. My attempt to undermine the traditional office environment had instead reinvented it. "The board wants to discuss your future with the company," Thomas continued, lowering his voice. "Your contract as Director of Workplace Environment comes up for renewal next month, and frankly, they're concerned about losing you to the competition after today's presentation." I took a sip of champagne, considering my options. The external offers were tempting, but there was something appealing about continuing to nurture what I'd built at Pinnacle. After all, the original jungle, my breakroom creation, was there, still thriving, still evolving. "What did you have in mind?" I asked. "Chief Sustainability Officer," he replied without hesitation. "A new position on the executive leadership team, overseeing not just the plant program, but all of our environmental initiatives. Complete autonomy, budget approval authority, direct report to the CEO." I nearly choked on my champagne. "Executive leadership? Me?" Thomas laughed. "Don't act so surprised. You've transformed our company culture, created a nationally recognized workplace model, and are now apparently in demand as an industry expert. Who else would we consider?" Who else indeed? The marketing manager who had plotted a petty revenge and accidentally pioneered a workplace revolution. The reluctant office dweller who had created spaces that people actually wanted to inhabit. The corporate rebel whose active resistance had been so thoroughly co-opted that it was now being offered as an executive position. "I'll need time to think about it," I said. "Of course, but don't take too long." He glanced around at the executives still hovering nearby, clearly waiting for their chance to speak with me. "Your stock is rising fast." Later that evening, back in my hotel room, I called my husband to share the news. "Chief Sustainability Officer," he repeated after I told him about Thomas's offer. "Sounds impressive, and completely unrelated to your original marketing role." "I know. It's bizarre." I kicked off my heels and flopped onto the bed. 2 years ago, I was plotting how to sabotage mandatory office attendance, and now I'm being courted for the executive team. "Life takes strange turns," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "So, what are you thinking? Will you take it?" "I'm not sure. The other offers are tempting too. I could consult, help other companies implement similar programs, have more variety, more freedom." But he knew me too well. There was a but hovering unspoken. But Pinnacle is where it all started. The original jungle is there. And I'd have real power to push the sustainability agenda beyond just plants. Corporate carbon footprint, renewable energy, waste reduction. I could make a meaningful impact. "Sounds like you've already decided," he observed. Had I? Perhaps. There was something poetic about ascending to the executive floor of the very company I'd once resented. About having a voice in the highest levels of decision-making. About transforming corporate culture not just through guerrilla gardening, but through official policy. "I'll sleep on it," I said. "But yes, I'm leaning towards staying." After we hung up, I stood by the hotel window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere in the distance was the Pinnacle headquarters building, its rooftop garden, my design, invisible in the darkness but thriving nonetheless. I thought about the journey that had brought me here, the anger I'd felt upon receiving that return to office mandate, the small act of rebellion that had spiraled into something much larger, the unexpected allies I'd found along the way. My revenge had not gone according to plan. It had been better. Rather than simply making my own situation more bearable, I'd changed the system itself. Rather than merely finding space to breathe within corporate constraints, I'd expanded those constraints for everyone. Rather than fighting against the machine, I'd helped to reimagine what the machine could be. Was that selling out, or was it the ultimate victory? I didn't have a definitive answer. But as I stood there contemplating my future as a potential executive, a role I'd never aspired to or imagined for myself, I realized that perhaps the most radical act wasn't resistance, but transformation. Not fighting the system, but evolving it into something more humane, more sustainable. The plants had taught me that. They didn't battle concrete and steel. They simply grew around it, through it, with it, until the artificial environment became something new. A hybrid space where nature and structure coexisted, each influencing the other. My phone buzzed with a text from Priya. Killed it today. Entire design team watching livestream was cheering. The mother of dragons conquers all. I smiled, setting the phone aside. Tomorrow I would make my decision. Tonight, I would simply appreciate how far a little greenery could go in changing the world. Chief Sustainability Officer Sarah Walker, please. The receptionist smiled up at the visitor, a young woman in a crisp suit clutching a portfolio. Do you have an appointment? Yes, 2 p.m. Taylor Reynolds from Evergreen Consultancy. Of course, Ms. Reynolds. Please take a seat. Ms. Walker is wrapping up another meeting and will be with you shortly. Taylor settled into one of the reception area's living furniture pieces, chairs crafted from special frames that supported actual growing grass and moss. The Pinnacle Solutions headquarters had become famous for these innovative biophilic design elements, and experiencing them firsthand was both strange and delightful. The entire reception area was unlike any corporate space she'd ever visited. Massive living walls created natural partitions. A small stream ran through the center of the space, connecting to a pond with actual fish. The ceiling featured a retractable glass section that currently allowed natural sunlight to stream in, supporting the diverse plant life that seemed to occupy every available surface. It was, in a word, alive. Ms. Reynolds? The receptionist's voice interrupted her observations. Ms. Walker will see you now. Follow the blue stone path to the vertical garden, then take the bamboo elevator to the 15th floor. Her assistant will meet you there. Taylor tried not to look too bewildered as she followed these unusual directions. A stone path? A bamboo elevator? Was this really a Fortune 500 company headquarters? But the blue stones were there, winding through the indoor landscape. And the elevator, while not actually made of bamboo, was surrounded by a bamboo grove that created the illusion of ascending through a forest. The 15th floor, executive territory, continued the theme. Instead of the sterile corridor Taylor had expected, she emerged into another garden space, more manicured than the jungle-like reception, but no less green. Living walls separated different areas, and hanging plants created semi-private canopies over seating arrangements. Ms. Reynolds, this way, please. A young man appeared from behind a particularly lush plant arrangement. I'm Leo, Ms. Walker's assistant. She's ready for you now. He led Taylor through the executive floor garden to a glass-walled office that offered views of both the city skyline and the interior green space. The office itself contained at least 20 plants of various sizes, from small succulents on the desk to a massive fiddle-leaf fig in the corner that nearly reached the ceiling. And there, standing by the window, with her back to the door, was Sarah Walker, the woman who had transformed corporate America's relationship with workspace, the legendary Mother of Dragons, who had turned a single break room into a nationwide movement. She turned as they entered, and Taylor was surprised by how normal she looked. No flowing garments or Earth Mother vibe, just a well-dressed executive in her mid-40s with a warm smile and intelligent eyes. Ms. Reynolds, welcome to Pinnacle. Sarah extended her hand. I've been looking forward to meeting you. Leo quietly withdrew, closing the glass door behind him. Please call me Taylor, and thank you for seeing me. Your work has been incredibly influential in my field. Sarah gestured to a seating area surrounded by trailing vines that created a sense of privacy within the glass office. Likewise, your research on biophilic design in educational environments is groundbreaking. That's why I wanted to meet personally rather than having HR handle the interview. Interview? Taylor felt a flutter of confusion. I thought this was a consultation meeting about implementing some of your strategies at client sites. Sarah raised an eyebrow, then laughed. I see there's been a miscommunication. I requested this meeting because I'm interested in bringing you onto our team, not hiring your consultancy. Oh, Taylor blinked, caught off guard. I didn't realize. My apologies for the confusion. But since you're here, would you be open to discussing the possibility? We're expanding the sustainability division, and your background in both design and environmental psychology would be invaluable. Taylor set her portfolio on the small table between them, mind racing. She hadn't come prepared for a job interview, especially not with one of her professional idols. I'm flattered, she managed. But I should be honest. I came here hoping to learn about how you started all this. The story behind the plants. The real story. Not the corporate version that's been published in business magazines. Sarah's expression shifted, a hint of amusement playing at the corners of her mouth. And why do you think there's a difference? Because no corporation willingly gives up control of its space the way Pinnacle did. Because the timeline doesn't make sense. You transformed entire floors within months of the post-pandemic return to office. Because... Taylor hesitated, then decided to be bold. Because I've heard rumors that it all began as an act of rebellion. For a long moment, Sarah was silent, studying Taylor with newfound interest. Then she reached over to a small control panel on the table and pressed a button. The glass walls of the office instantly frosted over, providing complete privacy. How much time do you have this afternoon? Sarah asked. As much as you need. Sarah settled back in her chair, a slow smile spreading across her face. Then let me tell you about a Monstera plant and a very bad day. For the next 2 hours, Taylor listened, enthralled, as Sarah recounted the true origin story of what had come to be known as the Jungle Corporation. The initial anger, the small act of defiance, the strategic escalation, the unexpected allies, the corporate co-option that had ultimately led to genuine change. So you see, Sarah concluded, it wasn't a carefully planned corporate initiative. It was revenge, pure and simple. Revenge that evolved into something much more meaningful than I ever anticipated. Taylor shook her head in amazement. That's incredible. And no one in leadership ever figured it out? Thomas suspects, I think, but he'd never admit it, since the whole thing has been so beneficial to his career. Sarah shrugged. The rest of the executive team believes the official narrative that it was a brilliant employee engagement strategy from the beginning. And now you're one of them, an executive yourself. Life is full of ironies. Sarah gestured to the thriving plants surrounding them. But being on the inside means I can push for changes that would have been impossible from my original position. The company's carbon-neutral pledge, the shift to renewable energy for all facilities, the sustainable supply chain initiative. None of that would have happened if I'd remained a guerrilla gardener in the marketing department. Taylor considered this. You changed the system by becoming part of it. I prefer to think of it as infiltrating and transforming rather than joining. Sarah smiled. Plants don't conquer territory by force. They grow into available space, adapting to conditions while gradually altering them. That's been my approach to corporate change. It's remarkable, Taylor said honestly. But why tell me all this? We've only just met. Sarah leaned forward, her expression serious now. Because I'm not looking for an employee, Taylor, I'm looking for a successor. A successor? I've been offered the position of Global Sustainability Director. overseeing all of Pinnacle's international operations. It would mean relocating to London and extensive travel. Sarah gestured to the plants around them. I need someone to take over here. Someone who understands that this isn't just about pretty greenery or corporate wellness programs. It's about fundamentally reimagining the relationship between work and life, between human systems and natural ones. Taylor felt a rush of excitement mingled with disbelief. And you think that person is me, based on one research paper and a 20-minute conversation? Based on the fact that you suspected there was more to the story, that you came here looking for the truth behind the corporate narrative, that tells me you have the right instincts. Sarah smiled. The same instincts that led me to bring a monstera to my desk that first day back. I don't know what to say. Say you'll think about it. The position is Director of North American Sustainability Operations. You'd report directly to me, with a team of 30 and considerable autonomy. I'll definitely think about it, Taylor promised, still processing the surreal turn her afternoon had taken. Sarah stood, indicating the meeting was drawing to a close. Good. And regardless of your decision, I trust you'll keep the origin story between us. The official version serves its purpose in the corporate world. Of course, Taylor assured her, gathering her portfolio. Though it's a shame, the real story is so much more inspiring. Maybe someday it can be told, Sarah said, walking her to the door. When the transformation is complete, when the balance between human systems and natural ones has been fully restored. As Taylor took the bamboo elevator back down to the reception area, her mind was spinning with possibilities. The job offer was unexpected but intriguing. The chance to work with Sarah Walker, to continue the revolution she had started, was tempting beyond words. But even more valuable was the story she'd been trusted with. A reminder that change didn't always come from grand gestures or official channels. Sometimes it started with a single plant on a desk, a small act of defiance that grew, one leaf at a time, into something powerful enough to transform an entire corporate culture. She stepped out into the living reception area with new eyes, seeing beyond the impressive biophilic design to the spirit of rebellion that had birthed it. The plants weren't just decorative elements or wellness features. They were silent revolutionaries, gradually reclaiming space in a world that had become too sterile, too disconnected from nature. And Sarah Walker, corporate executive, sustainability pioneer, accidental revolutionary, had shown that sometimes the most effective form of resistance wasn't fighting the system, but growing something new within it, something that would eventually transform it from the inside out, as inexorably as roots breaking through concrete. Taylor touched a leaf of the nearest plant, a simple pothos with trailing vines, and smiled. Perhaps it was time to start her own rebellion. 3 years to the day after receiving that fateful return to office email, I stood on the rooftop garden of Pinnacle's London headquarters, watching the sunset paint the city skyline in shades of gold and pink. Behind me, the global sustainability team was setting up for a celebration, the official announcement of Pinnacle's achievement of carbon neutrality across all operations worldwide. It had been a long journey from that first Monstera plant to this moment, from marketing manager to chief global sustainability officer, from reluctant office worker to corporate executive with teams on 3 continents, from small acts of revenge to systemic transformation. My phone buzzed with a text message from Taylor. Break room jungle thriving, expanded to 2nd floor last week. The revolution continues. I smiled, picturing the North American headquarters where it had all begun. Taylor had exceeded my expectations as my successor, maintaining the original jungle while expanding the sustainability initiatives in ways I hadn't imagined. Under her leadership, Pinnacle had become the industry standard for workplace environment design, with competitors scrambling to replicate our living office concept. More importantly, she had preserved the rebellious spirit behind it all, the understanding that this wasn't just about aesthetics or wellness metrics, but about fundamentally reimagining the relationship between humans and their work environments. There you are, said a familiar voice. Thomas, now president of international operations, emerged from the stairwell access. The press is starting to arrive. Communications team wants to prep you for the interviews. I'll be down in a minute, I promised, just taking a moment. He nodded, coming to stand beside me at the railing. The rooftop garden had been my first project after relocating to London, an edible landscape that provided produce for the executive dining room and served as a demonstration of urban agriculture techniques. Hard to believe how far we've come, he said, gazing out at the city. Remember when you asked permission to put a few plants in the break room? I glanced at him, wondering, not for the first time, how much he really knew about those early days. Had he figured out that my innocent plant project had begun as an act of defiance? That I had deliberately set out to subvert the very return to office policy he had championed? It seems like another lifetime, I replied carefully. In a way, it was, he agreed. A different pinnacle, a different approach to work itself. He turned to face me directly. I've never properly thanked you, Sarah. For what? For showing me a better way. I was so fixated on getting everyone back in the office, on returning to normal after the pandemic. I thought physical presence was the only way to build culture, to ensure productivity. He shook his head. I was wrong. The admission stunned me. In all our years of working together, through my rise through the ranks and our evolving professional relationship, Thomas had never acknowledged that his original position might have been mistaken. The plants were just the beginning, I said. They opened the door to questioning other assumptions about work. They changed everything, he corrected. Not just at Pinnacle, but across the industry. The flexible work policy, the focus on sustainability, the emphasis on employee well-being as a driver of business success. None of that would have happened without your initiative. There was the slightest hesitation before the word initiative. A hint that perhaps he suspected more than he let on about my original motivations. Well, I said with a small smile, plants have a way of growing beyond their intended boundaries. Indeed they do. He checked his watch. We should head down. Big moment for the company. For you. As we walked toward the stairwell, I took one last look at the London skyline, at the city where I now made my home. My life had taken turns. I never could have anticipated that day I received the return to office mandate. My small, petty act of revenge had blossomed into a career, a movement, a philosophy that had transformed not just my workplace, but workplaces around the world. Was it still revenge if it benefited the very people I had set out to inconvenience? Was it still rebellion if it had been so thoroughly embraced by the system I had intended to subvert? Perhaps the labels didn't matter. What mattered was the change itself. The reclamation of humanity in corporate spaces, the recognition that workers were not just productivity units, but living beings with connections to the natural world, the understanding that environments shaped behavior, culture, and outcomes in ways that spreadsheets and metrics could never fully capture. As we descended the stairs to join the gathering celebration, I thought about that first Monstera plant, now a massive specimen that still occupied a place of honor in the original break room jungle. From that small beginning, an entire ecosystem had grown, not just of plants, but of ideas, of possibilities, of new ways of working and being in the corporate world. The revenge had been sweet, indeed, sweeter than I could ever have imagined. The door opened to the executive reception area, where journalists, photographers, and company leaders waited. The communications director immediately approached, tablet in hand, ready to brief me on the upcoming press conference. I straightened my shoulders and stepped forward, ready to tell the official story of Pinnacle's sustainability journey. The corporate narrative that had been crafted and refined over the years, sanitized of any hint of rebellion or revenge. But in my mind, I held the true story. Of anger transformed into action, of resistance that became revolution, of a single plant that started a jungle. Some might call it selling out, becoming part of the very system I'd once resented. But I preferred to think of it as infiltration, like the roots of my plants slowly cracking the concrete foundations. I had worked my way into the power structure and changed it from within, one green tendril at a time. The jungle had won, after all, not by destroying the office, but by transforming it into something new. something better, something that honored both human nature and the natural world. And as I took my place at the podium, surrounded by the corporate leaders who had unwittingly funded my rebellion, I smiled at the beautiful irony of it all. They had forced me back to the office. I had turned their break room into a jungle. And in doing so, I had changed everything.